안녕하십니까. 대한민국 과학기술정보통신부 장석영 차관입니다. 한국과 미국의 ICT 산업 교류를 위해 오늘부터 4일간 진행되는 K-글로벌 at 실리콘밸리 2020의 첫 번째 행사인 ICT 혁신 포럼을 통해 여러분께 인사를 드리게 되어 매우 기쁘게 생각합니다. 그리고 오늘 키노트 스피치를 해주시는 네이버 클라우드의 박기현, 노튼 라이프록의 아숍 베널리 씨에게도 진심의 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 여러분도 아시다시피 올해 들어 글로벌 ICT 산업계는 큰 도전 과제를 받고 있습니다. 코로나19로 인해 전 세계의 경제사회적 활동이 급속하게 비대면으로 전환되면서 전 세계의 디지털 전환이 가속화되고 재택근무, 화상회의, 원격교육이 어느덧 우리의 생활과 업무 환경에 빠르게 확산되고 있습니다. 이런 예기치 못했던 위기 상황에서 우리의 생활과 경제가 안정적으로 지속될 수 있도록 하는 ICT의 역할은 그 어느 때보다도 중요해지고 있습니다. 기업인 여러분, 대한민국은 역동적인 ICT 산업 생태계를 가지고 있는 나라입니다. 최근 스위스 국제경영개발연구원 IMD가 발표한 2020년 세계 디지털 경쟁력 평가에서 한국은 8위를 차지하였습니다. 또한 한국은 10개 유니콘 기업과 800개 이상의 스케일업 기업이 있으며 연간 약 4조 원 이상의 벌시 투자가 이루어지고 있습니다. 서울과 판교에서는 삼성전자를 뛰어넘어 글로벌 빅테크 기업으로 성장하고자 하는 수많은 기업들이 치열한 경쟁을 벌이며 성장하고 있습니다. 특히 인공지능 분야는 코로나19 이후 ICT 산업에서 가장 큰 주목을 받으면서 기업 간, 국가 간 경쟁이 치열한 분야입니다. 이미 애플, 구글, 마이크로소프트, 페이스북 등과 같은 빅테크 기업들의 경우 인공지능 분야의 기술과 인재를 선점하기 위해 관련 스타트업을 경쟁적으로 인수하고 있습니다. 반도체 분야에서도 엔비디아가 ARM을 400억 달러에 인수하고 AMD가 자일링스를 300억 달러에 인수하는 등 인공지능 산업 생태계 격변이 이루어지고 있습니다. 이러한 인공지능의 중요성을 고려하여 올해 포럼의 주제를 포스트 코로나 시대를 대비한 인공지능 비즈니스의 현황과 전망으로 정하였습니다. 한국 정부는 데이터 기반의 인공지능 기업 육성과 함께 ICT 산업을 적극 지원하기 위해 디지털 뉴딜 사업을 대대적으로 추진하고 있습니다. 1930년대 미국의 뉴딜 정책이 후보댐을 건설하여 경제 위기를 극복했듯이 한국 정부와 산업계는 이른바 한국의 데이터댐을 만들어 경제 혁신과 일자리 창출이라는 국가적 과제를 해결하고자 합니다. 데이터댐 구축을 위해 한국 정부는 고품질의 대규모 데이터를 축적하는 프로젝트와 인공지능을 활용한 산업별 융합 프로젝트를 지원하는 한편 팬데믹으로 인해 글로벌 시장 규모가 급성장하고 있는 비대면 산업 또한 집중 육성하고 있습니다. 오늘 마련된 ICT 혁신 포럼을 통해 한국과 미국이 서로 ICT 산업 동향을 공유하고 상호 간 비즈니스 협력 기회가 더욱 확대될 수 있기를 희망합니다. 아울러 K-글로벌 at 실리콘밸리 2020의 주요 행사로 열리는 ICT 파트너십 엑스포와 K-피치 대회에서는 한국의 인공지능 분야에서 두각을 나타내고 있는 60여 개의 유망 기업들이 혁신적인 기술과 사업 모델을 선보일 것입니다. 바이어와 투자자 여러분의 많은 관심을 부탁드립니다. 끝으로 이번 행사를 준비해 주신 관계자 여러분께 감사 격려의 말씀을 드리며 참석하신 모든 분들의 건성을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
Hello everyone, welcome to K-Global at Silicon Valley event. This event introduces Korea's competitive technology and companies to the global industry. Needless to say, we know that this year's event is very special because we are meeting online now. We are at the beginning of this year. It may be very strange, But now we know that this kind of online event is not so strange anymore. Today, even though we get together in one place, we believe that we can communicate with each other, understand each other, and feel with each other through this online event. The theme of this year is technology in post-corona era. We cannot stop inventions and revolution of technologies even we are suffering the global pandemic. It is difficult to ignore that more technical efforts are necessary to overcome this situation. These efforts are making our technology more advanced. We can pick two technologies as game changers for post-corona era, AI and cloud. We already know these two technologies, artificial intelligence application and cloud computing platform, are tightly coupled and cooperatively affect several industries and several areas of our life. It would be a well-known story, but let me talk about some cases how they become game changers. Let's see a short video. It was recorded from the website Next Straight, an open source project to share genomic data. Through public available data and powerful analytic and visualization tools provided by this site, you can see how COVID-19 is moving around the world and spreading locally, how it is changing to the other variants. We are suffering the global pandemic, and we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed not only our lifestyle, but also technology landscape. It will affect both business and our personal lives, and it will be very important for business to adapt technology. This includes dealing with increased working from home, less travel, more video meeting and OTT service users, more online events, the need for business continuity on the cloud, cloud-based broader resilience plans are necessary, increased online content consumptions. Now, let's see one case of how AI and machine learning are helping to fight COVID-19. Two researchers at New York University realized that it may be possible to use predictive analytic technology to help clinicians deal with the coronavirus. We know that the coronavirus affects different people in different ways, with some experiencing mild symptoms and others severe. The algorithm that they developed predicts with the accuracy of 70 or 80% the people who became extremely sick. In general sense, this type of AI looks at existing data to find the pattern and then use those patterns to predict about the futures. Also, we know that if more data is given, the algorithm will be trained more and will be more accurate. It is basic mechanism of machine learning. Algorithm learns from the data. Let's talk about the AI a little more. Is it possible to explain artificial intelligence technology as a computer can think and can get autonomic intelligence like a human? Perhaps someday in the future. But at this time, AI just mimic the working of a human brain, so that we can say that AI is a set of computer program and algorithm modeling the way human thinks. But they typically operate quite differently. Machine learning is a kind of technique to fine-tune the modeled program from the data. Before machine learning program becomes popular, like these days, programmers code everything with if-then-else rules and procedures. Let's take an example. Assume that we have developed a program that recognizes abnormal event from the network monitoring system, such like intrusion attempt. With the traditional method, a programmer codes a set of rules such like if a number of packets per second change more than 10 times during 5 minutes, then if very sharply like a difference about 200%, then if something else something, and so on. However, how can programmer assure that the parameters, the 10 times, 5 minutes, 200%, they are correct? We know those parameters depends on the situation and cases. If we adopt the machine learning technology, then we will collect metadata of packet per second, then run anomaly detection algorithm to find good parameters describing abnormal patterns. If we apply this machine learning model to the other data set, then the result parameter will be different. Let's see what is deep learning. Deep learning is computer programming and algorithm that have multi-layered neural networks to process amount of data. It simulates a way human brain recognizes image or speech. The deep learning is a kind of machine learning because deep learning model can train using the labeled data set. Coronavirus had driven us to a crisis, but on the other hand, it has accelerated AI technology. The COVID-19 pandemic has helped wide global users for chatbot technology, advanced natural language processing AI technology. For example, WHO interactive chatbot on Rakuten Viber was launched. A leading research group have prepared the COVID-19 open research data set, which is over 200,000 scholar articles, including over 100,000 full texts. This freely available data set is used to generate new insight using AI technology. Self-driving AI technology, it is also boosted up due to the COVID-19. Autonomous vehicle is used to deliver food and supply to the hospital. Also, an AI system for rapid COVID-19 detection based on chest CT image is proposed. It adopts deep convolutional neural network deep learning technology. The more amazing point is that it is open source. Open COVID Detector is an open source COVID-19 diagnostic system implemented on PyTorch. Okay, now on, I'll explain a real example of AI technology. Let me introduce an AI for contact center, which is developed by Naver AI team and serves through Naver Cloud. Let me explain how it works. A call is set up between customer to IVR systems, much like a traditional contact center. Difference is customer voice is recognized and converted to text by the AI. Then dialogue is dealt with the chatbot system. And response is generated by the chatbot system is synthesized to the voice. If the chatbot cannot find the proper answer, then human agent can get involved into the conversation automatically. In Korea, this AI contact center system is used as corona care call. The AI system makes a call whom are under quarantine and under active monitoring twice a day, and they make a conversation with them to check they have fever or symptoms. Ask questions by machine-generated voice and recognize the human answers. Let me give an interesting example of how AI can be changed in everyday life. Naver developed a smart reading light called Clover Lamp that helps children to have reading habits by narrating their textbook aloud. Using computer vision and artificial intelligence technology, the lamp is able to convert text and images from the book into speech. Also, integrated virtual assistant can explain the meaning of the word and answer kids' questions to help them learn. We are all familiar with AI speakers. The idea is adding the OCR image recognition AI technology to this AI lamp. Next example is AI autonomous driving vehicle. To realize autonomous vehicle, the AI system requires map data, including not only road and lane, but also road sign and surrounding buildings. Needless to say, without correct map data, the AI car cannot drive the real road. However, map data collection is not easy and requires labor and time. NIPA labs utilize the data collected through both aerial image and mobile mapping system to create high-definition maps for autonomous driving vehicle. This hybrid HD mapping uses aerial image to extract the road layout information, such as road marking and lanes, through deep learning-based computer vision technology. Okay, now I'd like to say about the 5G brainless robot. Characteristics of 5G network technology are wide bandwidth, fast speed, and low latency. Does this only mean improving mobile game and fast video? How about applying 5G technology to AI for robot? AI for robot, we can say it is the brain of the robot. It requires high performance computing, as we know well. However, robot has a physical limitation regarding size and power. In the other words, small-sized robot can have only small-sized computer. So, NIPA Labs robot team tried to separate the robot's brain from the physical body and move it to the cloud. It has become due to the 5G technologies, which has extremely low latency. If 5G brainless robot technology is implemented, we can control multiple service robots simultaneously based on the cloud. Brainless robot mechanism, it makes it possible to easily upgrade the robot's AI algorithm and reduce manufacturing cost. You may have noticed that we are moving on to the cloud story. Let me say about the cloud as a game changer for post-COVID-19 eras. In the post-COVID-19 era, a digitalized service model becomes a new normal. Especially, the cloud service has showed its worth in necessity of business continuity and work from home during lockdown period. The cloud infrastructure scalability and SaaS consumption billing models, they were important. By definition, cloud computing should deliver on elastic solutions and services which is metered by users. How cloud computing has supported the COVID-19 response? Cloud computing has played a crucial role in enabling business and government to quickly apply solutions to respond to the crisis and maintain continuity. First one is, the cloud makes it possible deploying life-saving solutions quickly. The cloud provides ready-to-use environment. Second one is, we can say about the remote education, work from home, remote medical consultations. Explosive increase of traffic in pandemic situation had handled with the cloud's high-scale backend. The other one, the cloud-supported COVID-19 response will be accelerating the drug and vaccine response by big data and AI. We know that big data and AI can be achieved with the cloud's high-performance computing power. Most governments around the world has temporarily closed the educational institutions in an attempt to contain the spreading of COVID-19 pandemic. Educational institutions need to be able to move lectures and teachings from offline classroom to online. So several distance learning tools based on cloud are prepared and used for education during period of school closure. In South Korea, about 5.4 million elementary, middle, and high school students started new school year via distance learning. There was a struggling to cope with extra demand for online class system because there was only about 2 weeks preparation after government's decisions. Thanks to the cloud's agility, elasticity, and scalability, the system has been expanded rapidly and became stable. Actually, main online class service for Korean students is being serviced on top of Naver Cloud platform. For cloud story, we cannot miss data center. The second data center of Naver, KIC-SV, will be a hyperscale cloud data center as foundation for AI, big data, robot, and so on. We think that data center is an indispensable resource for the future because it helps to store safely the record of our life and business of companies. Korean government says data is the 21st century's oil. Oil was the economic driver of the last centuries. Now, data have the same potential. In the upper right corner, you can see the Naver Cloud is operating several global cloud regions. Lastly, the value of cloud as game changer in post-corona era will be cloud for business. In post-COVID era, for business entity, it is very common to use the cloud as their infrastructure and platform. The COVID-19 pandemic and resulting economic downturn have most likely accelerated a shift to the cloud for some companies. Why? Because cloud provides the agility and scalability that can help companies cope with this crisis more effectively. They are realizing the cloud services are not just a modernization strategy, but it's actually a good tool ensuring business continuity with uncertainties. This slide, a case of the second largest life insurance company in Korea, who selected Naver Cloud hybrid cloud solution, NeuroCloud, for their core business. Let me introduce Naver Cloud briefly. We started since April 2017, and we are fastest growing Korean public cloud service provider. As shown in this slide, now we are providing about 162 cloud service products and 6 global regions. This is our cloud service portfolio. We are providing several products within 15 categories. Who are using? Yes, you can find some familiar names such as Samsung, SK Telecom, and Battleground. Yes, many Korean companies are using Naver Cloud. Lastly, I would like to explain our global business strategy. Yes, we are Korean cloud service provider. Needless to say, our global business strategy is companionship with Korean technology companies, especially SaaS companies. In Korea, there are many small and medium-sized software companies, and they are eager to expand their business to the global. However, it is not easy, difficult to do alone, including global marketing. So we want to help each other by forming a fleet of ships of ICT and SaaS solution partners. As part of our companion approach, we have opened another online event, K-Cloud Scale Up Summit 2020, with several SaaS partners. We are attending K-Global at Silicon Valley event. which introduced Korea's competitive technology and companies to the global industries. I hope this event be a gate to enter and plug into Korea's competitive technology and companies. You can find an interesting AI technology developed by Korean companies. Also, you can find the new challenge of Korea cloud industry. I assure that AI and cloud are real game changers for COVID-19 era. Artificial intelligence application, cloud computing platform cooperatively will advance our life and our industry. Thank you very much for listening to my speech.
Hi, I'm Ashok Banerjee. I've been the CTO for Enterprise Security at Symantec for quite some time. I wanted to talk to you about AI and cybersecurity. It's two of my favorite topics. If you think of AI, it's a bunch of neurons which fire, associate, and lead to a better outcome where we make decisions. And layers of these neurons make the decisions. It's like layers of matrices multiplying each other and reaching a closure. This was slower. This was harder before the cloud, before GPUs, before tensor processing unit, TPUs. Today, cloud and AI go together. We do better learning with bigger volumes of data, faster with GPUs and TPUs. Trace back a little along the arc, even before COVID. The world was getting far more digital every day. Roll back to 2000. Searches were the big thing, exciting thing where we could index and have the whole world at our fingertips. By 2010, it was our feelings on Facebook and Twitter. By 2012, it was increasingly starting to show Dropbox, Box, DocuSign. It was beyond feelings, the files and content that we are able to share and collaborate with others. By 2015, we were already talking about digital contracts for physical things. So Uber, Lyft, Netflix, these were all about digital contracts for something in the physical world. Airbnb. Fast forward to 2020. The silent revolution today is Industry 4.0, industrial IoT, far more things everywhere. The industrial objects are coming online. Everything now with COVID increasingly is going digital as well. Think of professional services. Telemedicine is becoming much more mainstream. The courts are accepting filings online. It's increasingly a world infinitely more digital, infinitely richer content, where we have Google Home and Alexa in our homes. This slide will show you the growth of e-commerce. E-commerce as a percentage of retail sales. How we consume the subscription services, from movies to music to files to legal information, it's consistently more digital across the board. Take that trend a bit further. Think of dating, the growth of Tinder. Think of how we think of our neighborhoods, Nextdoor, the growth of Nextdoor. How do we elect presidents, which is as important as it gets? Look at the spending online for elections. An interesting fact, in 2016, Donald Trump had 5.9 million variations of ads he was targeting to Facebook users, while Hillary Clinton only had 66,000 ads. That's a massive, different types of ad, variations of ads. Massive, massive difference. This time, 2020, Joe Biden had more variations and more spend. And this is consistent, not just US, from Brexit to the Do So campaigns of Trinidad. Think of machine learning near you. From the iRobot Roomba, which vacuums your home, to Google Translate, to Google Home, to Kiva automation in the warehouses to military drones across the board, the full spectrum. We are seeing automation. We are seeing increasing AI and autonomous systems. 18th century was about steam. The finest innovation was around steam. 19th century, it's smart factories, industry, pipelines of people working in industrial shifts. 20th century, dark factories, lights out manufacturing. It's fully automated. And today, that automation is completely online increasingly. With Industry 4.0, it's autonomous systems, sensors, and actuators deciding from everything, oil and gas to retail to warehouse to electric power plants to nuclear power plants. That's the positive. The flip side, when so much goes online, for better or for worse, criminals go online too. They won't rob you with a gun because you aren't carrying that much cash. All your cash is online. All your things are online. So in an odd way, countries, nation states, everyone collaborates, and yet the weakest spot for everyone is the cyber-physical world, which runs the control plane of a nation. Cyber attacks and cyber defense co-evolve. When there's e-commerce fraud. When there's news and social networks, there's fake news. When there's email, there are account takeovers. When there are bank accounts, there are impersonation attacks. And when there are industrial IoT, there's absolutely cyber-physical warfare. The dark side of cyber attacks. Attackers are looking for everything in the dark web, from your credit card numbers to your healthcare conditions. And they get paid more when they correlate it with your actual address, electricity usage, gas usage, all kinds of data. Cars you drive, everything. And it's actually shockingly not that expensive, where people are putting out personal data of someone else. With a lot of information, there's also increasing deep fake. Neural networks that we talked about, which drives a lot of systems from speech recognition to image recognition, is getting widely used for deep fakes where reality is warped for many of us. Here are a few examples of Putin and Trump and Zuckerberg where they're deep faked. Simply put, people have picked up fingerprints from cameras, just like this. And the people who were hacked, celebrities, politicians, were doing nothing more than showing their palm in genuine honesty. The full fake news pipelines. Fake news pipelines ranging from creation of content, including media, with a pivot on a real story. Next, amplifiers and resonators who build this up, followed by actual removal of the original source to reduce attribution. And then there's language like, could it be? Was it possible? To avoid legal implication. When you look at the social effects on us, cyber attacks have gone after ransomware for some period. But the consumer ransomware actually declined. And it's been declining primarily because of the adoption of the cloud. Our emails are in Office 365 and Gmail. Our files are in Dropbox and Box. And increasingly, people have more and more content elsewhere. Interestingly also, since 2016, we live in a slightly post-embarrassment world where just because someone says, I've got naked pictures of you, people don't pay up the ransom. Good example, Jeff Bezos, he actually didn't. The attacks are increasingly more targeted. If you look, retail attacks are on a decline, but targeted attacks are on a rapid ramp up and increase. The targeted attacks target bigger and bigger fish, bigger and bigger enterprises, bigger and bigger teams and campaigns come together to attack. If there are 10,000 employees, phishing attack on any one of the 10,000 working gives the attacker a leg up. Now let's look at the cyber-physical world. Oil and gas, entire plants have been wiped out of information, all information wiped out. Stuxnet, the uranium enrichment nuclear project in Iran, Iran's nuclear arsenal, the entire thing was set back by 5 years with a cyber attack. That was probably the deepest. Industroyer, where power plants were taken offline. These are very real. Even if things are not connected online, for instance, in Iran's case, the nuclear installation was not online, it was offline. But code had to travel from someone coding somewhere to the actual uranium enrichment facility. And it was a highly targeted attack which went through printer spoolers and computer to computer, infecting a Siemens project file, transmitting over USB, going into the production systems, finding the right number of frequency converters of the right model, and ensuring that it's spinning at the uranium enrichment frequencies, and then activating devastatingly to spin those tubes at the resonant frequency so that the tubes would burst. Machine learning has gone a long ways, from comparison pricing to collaborative filtering to ensembles of models, speech recognition, computer vision, to even robotic music composition, robotic journalism. Alexa and Google Home, incidentally, were very popular Christmas gifts. They work. They actually do work. If you look at the gaming industry, Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue in 1997. Fast forward to 2011, Jeopardy! Ken Jennings lost to IBM Watson. Fast forward to 2016. AlphaGo, Lee Sedol lost to the DeepMind. So across the board, you're seeing an improvement in AI. Massive, massive improvement. By the age of 16, a human child has listened to 14,000 hours of speech. Let that sink in for a moment. That 14,000 hours on 1,000 computers can be accomplished in 14 hours. In 14 hours, a set of computers can pick up everything that someone with a child in 16 years can learn. And now, once it's learned on one computer, it can be conveyed to everything else. We always wonder, are we collectively, as nations, collaborating to bring and uplift all of humanity with cyber-physical devices with the best of collaboration? Or are the nations also competing and fighting with each other constantly, mercilessly, attacking each other's infrastructure? It is unfortunately both. We have attacks in Ukraine, which spread to England and spread to the Mondelez factory in Idaho, making Oreo cookies. So the spread is far beyond what we could have imagined. And this is continuing in every frontier of the world. When we think of the 19th century, I'll take you back a century, 1920s. If you were somebody important, you had the best of horses. They would gallop faster, look more elegant, and if you had more horses, you were a superior nobleman. At that time, there was a whole take that there would be global warming from the horse dung. Fast forward 20 years, 30 years, and cars take over more and more and more of what the horses used to do. Horses didn't become lazy. Horses just became unemployable. The horse population today is nowhere close to the population that it used to have in the 1900s. I'm excited, on the one hand, for the most profound of human endeavors, which is to enable a machine to understand speech like we do, to have vision like we do. And Google Home, Alexa, they do that. It's the most life-altering and yet the most disturbing. What do humans do in a world of AI where computers do a lot more? The most enduring of questions: are humans the horses of the 21st century? Thank you for joining me at the K Global 2020 virtual conference. Excited to be here, excited about the bilateral work between the United States and South Korea and the companies there. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining me today. My name is Angelo Del Priore, a partner at HB Tech Ventures. I want to talk to you today with our great panelist about AI, not just for their own companies during the pandemic, but what they see as the future for the industry in general, not just for their companies after the pandemic, and some of the challenges and successes that they've had. So I want to start talking today with our first panelist and have everyone introduce themselves to give you context. So if I can ask each panelist, Tony, to start with you, just a sentence or two about your company so everyone can understand where you're coming from, and then we'll dive into questions. Tony, could you start first?
So my name is Tony Lee. I'm a CEO and president of Solos Incorporated. I established this company before 20 years ago, and now this company is providing AI technology to the Korean customer and in Japan or other countries.
Super, thank you. Maha, can you introduce yourself next?
Sure. My name is Maha Ashur. I'm the founder and CEO, CTO of MetaWave. I founded the company in 2017. So MetaWave is building an AI-enabled long-range, high-resolution radar for ground transportation vehicles. And at the same time, we leverage this technology to extend coverage of broadband wireless networks using our passive reflectors and active relays. On the AI side, the radar being trained with our own variation of convolutional neural network, the ability to classify objects at long distance. So not only detect and track objects at 300 meters, but also label them in real time.
Awesome, thank you. James, could you go next and tell us just a couple of minutes about yourself and your company?
Thank you. Hi, my name is James. I'm a Chief Algorithm Officer in Seoul. We established the company 17 years ago. So we have three different platforms actually. One is the wild big A data ingestion platform. Second is Cheetah, is the very fast machine learning pipeline platform. And lastly, Serengeti for multi-cloud platform.
Super, thank you. And then last but not least, Spence, can you tell us a little bit about your company?
My name is Spence Green. I'm the CEO of Lilt. We make it possible for companies to make their products and services available in lots of different languages. And the way that we do that is by building human-in-the-loop systems for language translation. So we take systems, machine translation systems, everybody's familiar with Google Translate. We build systems of that type. In fact, that's where my co-founder and I met. And pair those with professional human translators to make it possible for businesses to translate more at a much lower price point, but the same quality.
So I want to kind of break it down to three sections. The first is you're running these super interesting companies. You're applying solutions, fixing things for actual customers. Just start with you, Spence, and then please jump in. It's so much more interesting if everyone just kind of goes off each other versus listening to me. What's been the biggest challenge for you during COVID? Was it the data that got broken? Was it people ran out of budgets?
The way our technology works is it learns as it's used. And language is changing all the time. So none of us used the phrase social distancing prior to, I don't know, March the 15th or something like that. Now all of us know this phrase. And so our system will learn that and learn a translation for it. It does sort of learning as it's used. So in terms of the technology, I think in language technology in general may be less susceptible to hindsight bias than some sort of forecasting technology. Like I'm sure, revenue forecasting has been very difficult during this time. And indeed, I think that's where it's been challenging for us as well, which is that businesses, large scale initiatives, unless they're having to do with remote work, businesses have just sort of pushed those off into the future. So I think with current customers, it's been great because more and more of the world is going digital and going on the internet, and that's great for localization and for creating multilingual experiences for people. But for businesses that haven't made that leap to transform localization and make it more digital and more technology enabled, they've sort of put that off into the future when there's more certainty.
What are some other problems that people have faced or challenges?
During the COVID-19, people are not able to go to school, so they are not able to do some experiment after the, even in midnight or something. So we just provide a web address, and students easily log into from home and do experiment online when they want. So it was such a lesson learned from that kind of situations.
Got it. Tony, Maha, other points to add in terms of challenges?
Driving on freeways have been always much easier than pre-COVID, collecting data in different weather conditions. We also had the opportunity to train the radar and the AI platform post the ash after the fires to investigate the impact of these ash droplets in the atmosphere as well. So, I think so far it's been no impact on us from the AI side. On the business side, of course, we had to readjust because there's no more travel. So all the customer support, the training is all done via Zoom.
Tony, anything from your perspective?
From my perspective, in Korea, actually, my company Solux has two different revenue streams from the public sectors and private sectors. Actually, it is not easy to persuade our customer in private sectors. They are more conservative to invest the new technologies. So now we are focusing on the public sector more and more, and we can find the good opportunities because in the world, all the government sectors want to how can I say, encourage new technologies to make better futures and also more hiring. So that is one of the experiences in the COVID-19 situations.
Are there any things that you did as a team on the engineering, technical, business side you're like, wow, right? That really saved us so that people can kind of learn, said, oh, if I have a choice and it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg, let me do this because, there's always a what if scenario, just bending around the corner. Any, tips to share?
I can start because just in a matter of 1 week, we went from 70% accuracy of this labeling to 90% accuracy. And all it took is just understanding the interconnections between these different blocks in the machine learning platform. And I believe the reason why the team now has more time at home, they're not stressed out driving back and forth on freeway. They have more time and they collaborate more. We use a lot of collaboration tools besides Zoom. So we actually, were able to tackle the machine learning platform that we struggled with for a while to get to the 90% accuracy. And this is with still using only 5% of the collected data as a sample to do human-made verification.
So let's talk a little bit more generally in terms of, let's take a little bit of cheer. I mean, we've had some good vaccine news over the last few days, which has been amazing. But what are some of the other areas maybe that people don't know about where you've been like, AI has shined? I mean, I think we're all both firm believers like AI, augmented, artificial, whatever you want to call it, is such a transformative way. But what are some of the areas that you have seen, right, given your careers outside of your company, just from other CEOs or other folks that you know in the industry? Anybody want to jump in?
Probably start because I think among all your panel attendees, MetaWave is the one that's really working very closely between hardware and software. So we're first, number one, we're a hardware company, but we're leveraging software to make that hardware smarter. So we do understand the fine line between the analog signal processing and that digital layer that provides this extra capability for the radar. And what we realized, unlike cameras, where their AI is based on pixelization, image recognition, all of these things, which is kind of a textbook, algorithms, in radar, it's completely a different beast that you have to train. And the beauty of that is that when the radar is able to detect an object, think about the Tesla today, being able to detect a motorcycle, let's say at 300 meters, and the car is driving over, maximum speed. It doesn't have to burden all the cameras to scan and identify objects in the whole field of view. It can just alert the sensor fusion. In that regions of interest, there is an object at this long distance, just focus on that and make sure you decide to change lane or slow down or so forth. So I think the beauty is analog, AI, and then the combination with the full sensor fusion ADAS algorithms.
Let's talk about now AI post-COVID. Like we have our, the last half of this conversation, I think it's more interesting to talk about. We will get to a new normal. What are the opportunities for yourselves as well as for just the AI industry in general? And Spence, we'll let you go first for sure this time.
Well, it seems to me that that COVID has simply advanced trends that were already making progress and sort of compelled all of us to be more open to change. And I think in general, with the adoption of these technologies, that we find with customers, it's the change management part that's often like the technology is well beyond where people are. And the more that gap can narrow, the better. And, in particular in our business, I think you mentioned, buying software, you can sort of think of it as deterministic. It executes a sequence of actions and people can sort of get behind that. And then you have technologies that, well, they work really well in one setting and they don't work at all in some other setting. And so you have to iterate and make a model better and then it gets slightly better. This seems to be very troubling for various industries. And in particular, we have a federal business like Tony, we have a public sector business, and this application of this type of technology into government applications where it has super high impact. I think there's been some acceleration of knowledge that we've got to get more of this technology into public sector settings as soon as possible. And in general, I think that's a good thing.
Others, in terms of, post-COVID in the new normal, where we're all shopping online or driving our self-driving cars, Maha?
Post-COVID, what I think needs to happen is that there should be some sort of organization, global organization. They should predict the outburst of these pandemics before they propagate globally. And
I think we all agree to that in theory.
I know, but there are some patterns that you can see without even those communities knowing that it is happening. But just collecting this information and comparing them, you can speculate that probably there is a pandemic that's emerging, so you can at least send a group or just at least investigate before it goes out of control. I think that's going to be a very powerful way of deploying AI globally.
Feel free to pressure test each other. Don't let me do all the questioning here.
Yeah, I know James probably he has a lot to say here.
Thank you. After a digital transformations, COVID-19 contribute to shorten the period of reach a certain degree of stage. So I think AI play a pivotal role in personalized something, more personalized the offering. One example is probably personalized diagnostic assessment, particularly in COVID. So Tony mentioned together with the chatbot and electronic health record, maybe people can diagnose their health condition from home without any interaction with hospital or institutions. So once the data transformation achieves a certain amount of digital data, then people naturally want a more personalized approaches and communications. So I think we can see this kind of changes very soon.
What is going to be the spurt that's going to enable AI startups and companies and governments to do more stuff that people may not appreciate as that's going to be a fantastic enabler? And it could be better GPUs. It could be some kind of chips. Thoughts?
I can just speak to my own field. My background's in natural language processing, and both the US government and the European government. In the US, about 25-ish years ago, the government set up the Linguistic Data Consortium, which is kind of the repository for linguistic data produced by the federal government. And in Europe, there's some analogs as well. And man, it's relatively low cost compared to what government spends on lots of things to annotate data, but cost prohibitive for early stage companies and all, but sort of much larger companies to annotate a lot of data. And it doesn't take much to really create a lot of innovation. So I think we recently submitted a policy paper to a congressional body on this topic. And I think it's just relatively low cost, and the return on investment is just extremely high to make put data in the public domain for people to do research on.
Other thoughts about enablers before we get to?
Yeah, sure. Since you mentioned 5G and also fixed wireless networks, as you know, the conventional way of deploying these large-scale networks are all based on just coverage. But at the end, when you have very high data consuming applications, especially like the Zoom that we're using or remote data health and so forth, you will need to have some sort of an AI engine running at the edge to assess the load of these data in time and space and nodes to carefully scale the network as the data is required, not as the number of users increases. So that's another space that I think is going to really emerge in broadband fixed and mobile networks.
Any shadows on the industry? Is it whether it's explainability, privacy, getting edge applications to work? What keeps you up at night?
I think in terms of scalabilities, I think that AI and cloud platform is very close together, because once we started with a small scale, but we are uncertain about an explosion of customer base when we deploy that solution to the public. And so when you develop the solution in private cloud because of security reason, but in a nutshell, the ultimate goal is to provide the service to the public. In that case, is we have to move to the public spaces. So probably this kind of multi-cloud, recipe will be required. And so cautious about the scalability. I think that is another area to think about.
Other things to worry about or think about? It's like, we need to get over this hump. That's going to hold AI back a little bit.
How to get to very high accuracy. It's very critical, especially when you're dealing with life and death, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
That's always a challenge. How do you do that with the least number of samples that you have to annotate and pass it by the ground truth system?
So then this kind of brings me to my last question I wanted to end with, which is, we'll go from this, Maha. When do you think what the problem you're solving, natural language translation, chatbots, self-driving cars, when can you be like, humans, go do something else, we got this?
Well, yeah, I think the current convolutional neural network have been around for a while. In my opinion, they are the most simplistic algorithms or mechanism that the AI industry know how to interpret. That doesn't mean that they are the only one. In my opinion, there is a lot of room to improve on these type of networks, maybe nonlinear, maybe topological, kind of manifold application for these machine learning platforms. But also as you get closer to the analog interface and balance the complexity between the zeros and one and the analog circuits, then I can say you will get there. Maybe that will not happen until 10, 15 years from now.
All right, Tony, I'll pick on you next. When am I going to want to speak to a chatbot?
So the customers of Solux is very huge financial companies. And for that cases, all the chatbots should be installed inside their financial networks, and we cannot utilize the personal or private data sets outside the network. But for the future, I have no ideas.
Understood. All right, James and Spence, you've had plenty of time to think about this. Can either of you answer the question in a year or range?
with regards to Tony's point on my data in Korea, the bright side is in healthcare, government try to, pull the ownership from the hospital. The personal, the health record or informations, and deliver that information and asset to the people. Once an individual have a power to, maintain their own health record, then probably there's a lot of, benefit from customer point of view, because one individual can bring that data to the specific institutions and ask some specific, diagnose.
Got it. So Spence, I'm going to make this personal, see if I can wrangle an answer out of you. Should my daughter major in languages at college, or is it just like, stop, don't do it? We're going to translate everything for you instantaneously in X years.
Yeah, she should. And also you can use it right now. So both, I think. And the reason for that is that I think that it's sort of a difference between an extrinsic measure of accuracy and an intrinsic measure. So how soon will machines be able to translate any arbitrary sentence with a high degree of accuracy? I don't know. How soon will machines be able to translate text so it's useful in a variety of business applications? Well, that's right now. And so I think it really depends on the business application. And I mean, I think one way to think about it with language is like, how soon are you going to be ready for a machine to auto-generate all the responses to your email? And it sort of, depends, right? Some people, you'd just love to have a machine do that right now, and you'd be fine with the output and maybe not generate, responses to your spouse or your friend. That's a little bit more delicate. And so you can sort of think about that.
This is good life advice. Thank you. I didn't realize now we're bleeding over to, but that's another talk show. Anyway. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the live Q&A. If you still have any questions, I know we've already gathered some, feel free to keep sending them in and we'll try to get to them. I'm joined with two of my panelists right now, Maha and James, and we may be getting one more. So please let us know if you have any questions. The first question from the audience that I want to ask is, what do you think is going to be the impact of AI in terms of rich and poor or cross-border? Do you think it's going to make things, accentuate differences? Do you think it will help narrow differences? Would either of you like to jump in first? James, Maha, do we have, or are we waiting for translation to happen? I'm having an issue. I can't hear Maha. I hear the translator. I'm not sure if Maha and James, you have the same issue.
Oh, no, we can hear you well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear, but
okay. So the question from the first audience question was, what do you think will be the impact of AI in terms of, will it increase the differences between societies or within societies? Do you think it will help ameliorate some of the gaps between rich and poor?
Yeah, I think from my own perspective, coming just from the transportation point of view, it is going to further enhance the divide between the rich and poor, because now, people who cannot afford owning their own cars, they have better ways to being transported from point A to point B using the same mechanism like others. So transportation, definitely, it's gonna ease that burden between the poor and rich.
Got it. And then James, anything to add to that?
I think AI technology is kind of a disruptive technology, so it will drive the certain degree of innovations. So having said that, probably these interruptions and innovation will drive a new transformation of the industry, or create a new brave new world type of business of our society. So, but hindsight is probably it'll. I'm afraid whether this kind of acceleration will create another digital divide. So I think there's two different sides of the coin here.
That's a follow-on question that someone else had asked. It's like, where do you think not just the benefits are going to be, but what are going to be some of the losses? Right? So it's pretty broadly defined, right? It could be employment, it could be ethical, it could, lots of things. James, to kind of stick with you on that, on the other side of the coin, what do you think some of the potential negative consequences are?
Currently, if I look into advancement of our technology, I think a very dominant leader, maybe they lead the new transformations. So the other side, like the small or mid-sized institution or countries, may not catch up the kind of advancement of technology. So in terms of the impact in industry or society, it will enlarge the gap between the advanced group versus the followers. So I think this kind of digital divide will be a one of the factor to consider.
Maha, any negatives from your perspective? We can get philosophical, talk about the train running over people or flipping the switch.
Yeah, I think anything that has digital aspect is prone to hacking, and hacking or security is always going to be a big issue because if you're running a hardware product, you can easily know if it's hacked or not. But a software, it's even if you try to create an intelligence to kind of recognize these hacking scenarios and try to counter them, you will always have a stronger AI to offset that too. So I would probably think security is always going to be the nightmare and always could be a huge global issue for AI.
Does explainable AI help address at least part of that security concern that you have, or not particularly? Because there's so many other, places to attack and ramifications.
Oh, you're talking about the transportation application?
No, just in general. But yeah, we could use transportation certainly as a case study.
Yeah, so I think in transportation, as you know, the sensor fusion or the software stack resides into the car, or it could be distributed among different cars with the edge compute and so forth. So there will be so many different parameters, regardless if the driver is in the loop or out of the loop. And if a mechanism is known to inject some sort of hacking scenarios, maybe fool the car by saying or letting the camera know that these are not people, but these are maybe just a plotter or something like that. So yeah, there are ways that in my opinion, security could be breached through the AI in these kind of scenarios. And this is why the edge compute, the edge AI inside the hardware sensor, like the radar, becomes extremely important because it operates independently from any external parameters, independently from the sensor fusion, independently from the V2X, from the V2V. So no one can really fool the radar by telling them that this is not a human being, this is kind of a tree, for example.
Got it. One more question, kind of general impact of AI before we switch over to some career related questions and then also some international comparisons, which is like, what should be the goal of AI? And the person had listed out accuracy as one. Maha, for you, I assume quickness, right, is a critical factor. Other things that, you're like, okay, we have to trade off these things as we're making our models and building our stack?
Yeah, so accuracy is always going to be the first target or the first milestone for AI because you're trying to predict something that typically a human being or some regular algorithms are doing. But down the road, you have to go beyond that. So for example, in the automotive sector, there are something called predictive analytics, which means that now the car can predict an accident even before happening. So now you're going beyond just providing an accuracy on some object classification, but basically predict a scenario before even it happens.
Makes sense, makes sense. James, you were going to say something?
At first step, most of researchers or practitioners, they focus on the model develop itself. But we have to think about why we develop this kind of machine learning model. Ultimately, the answer is service to the customer or any end users. So you don't do that. Machine learning normally collect the large amount of data and do some training, and they figure out certain parameters. But the question is, if we serve that model to the public, whether this kind of accuracy will meet their standard. I think that is a big question to all of us, because if we have 95 accuracy in our model itself, does not guarantee to be the same level of accuracy when we serve to the real life data. So my answer is, we have to think about those kind of model service pipeline, from data collection, feature engineering, training, and validation and deploy. So ultimately, when our model meets the real life data, whether we guarantee similar level of accuracy to the customer. So I think that kind of model services, whether it is a smartphone or any end user terminal, I think that kind of consideration is important.
Got it. So let's go on to that question and switch a little bit around. People had some questions around Korea and comparisons to Korea with some other nations. One of them is, should Korea, we can take it more broadly, invest more in the application of AI or in some of the more underlying technologies? And James, you want to start with this one?
I think last year, government appointed 5 different AI-specific graduate school, and we try to government point of view, we try to catch up a state-of-the-art research area, but at the same time, government selected 5 different actually area, including bio and smart factory and something like that. So industry specific. So hard to say whether I can, differentiate those 2 areas distinctly. But we have 2 different, track. One is try to catch up a, state-of-the-art a research area. At the same time, we now construct some beachhead in each specific industry-specific application area, such as bio or smart factory or smart city, something like that. So yeah, that is my observations.
Okay, and then one other question around this, international comparisons is, are there any generalizations either, or any of the 3 of you can make about the state of AI in Korea or China or the US, or pick a favorite geography if you're saying like, this place is doing this really well or falling behind? And Spence, I think you're on mute.
I am, but I'm here.
Super, thanks. Oh, so the question, just to reiterate it, is do you see any kind of differences that you can make generalization at a country level between the China, US, Korea, or some other country or region? And this is going to blend over to our section of questions around career development, because I know we have a number of students on the line.
Is that a question for me?
Anybody who'd like to jump in? I don't want to put you on the spot by any means.
I think from China point of view, government strongly drive some hotspot or some the policy around the AI, whereas U.S. seems to be that kind of innovation seems to come from the institution or private sector. When I look into the Korea, particularly in COVID-19, government strongly drive the. They choose some focus area. At the same time, they cultivate the ecosystem to accelerate AI advancement. But my observation is at the same time in biology sector, we have a small and mid-sized biology company. They equipped a certain degree of AI technology, and they have a very, very strong demand to leverage and embrace the AI technology. So they actually develop a very fast solution around COVID-19 and even in diagnosis area. So I can say Korea in the middle, or in government-driven versus private sector-driven. I think I can see any strong bias in any side, but government do the right job, and private sector strive to catch up the gap between Korea and US and China.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I think on the students' side, it's very good to have multidisciplinary background in AI, not just computer science, because computer scientists, they only know how to code, but they don't know the bits and the insight of the application. I'll give you a very simple example, like in radiology. Now they're using AI to interpret very complex, radiology, MRI or CAT scan, results. So having some sort of background in medical or to take some multidisciplinary classes with AI could further enrich their career objectives.
Got it. Thank you. Spence, any career advice for students?
Are we still on the China question or the?
We seem to have shifted. So you could take China for 200 or career development for 3.
And is this the pre-recorded session, or we're just practicing here?
This is the live session for the Q&A. They ended up editing our piece, and it ended up being a little bit shorter, so it started sooner than planned.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything additional to add on that point.
All right. What about if you're talking to an intern who comes to you, they're 20 or 21 and they're in college and they're like, hey, what should I study or what should I have done? Or is there something you're looking for?
I think for undergraduates, and I wish I had done this myself. I think there's no substitute for mathematical maturity. And if I had it to do over again, I would major in math and then do a master's degree in an applied field.
Is there anything in particular within math? Is statistics, is it calculus? Is there something in particular that you think?
I think pure mathematics or statistics, and learn how to do proofs and proof theorems and the branches of pure math. And then I think then you're set up well to do any applied engineering field as a master's degree.
Understood. James,
it's very hard to remedy that deficiency later on. I say this from personal experience.
I think that happens with a lot of, whether it's physics or chemistry or math or, right, it's hard to go back and make yourself do a bunch of proofs when you're 25 or not being forced to do it. So
that's right.
Yeah, okay. James, anything else to add in terms of career advice for students?
Today, I saw some message from Facebook. Actually, one graduate student asked the question to the forum. I like to focus on state-of-the-art research, but current situation is, test, and what else I can do to be a more promising, scientist or engineer. Well, there was questions. This question back to my accuracy questions. Most of people, they are involved in state-of-the-art research, but if we do some impact to the society and the customer, model itself is very important. But if you think about the full life cycle of machine learning pipeline, it accounts for only 5%. Rest of the 55% account for data engineering, training, deployment, and finally, model service to the public. In order to do this kind of pipeline, if one cannot do all the stuff, but if they have a certain degree of knowledge about cloud and the model development and source code development and the load balancing, so on and so forth. So it will be enrich their opportunity to go a more diverse area to contribute. So, there's another discussion about the AI University, chairman group. They discussed whether state-of-art research focus is important or multidisciplinary type of talent development is important. I don't have any answer at this point in time, but from a follower point of view, if one can, envision about across the whole pipeline, then I think that'll give on more opportunity to the potential job seeker. So yeah, that is my observations.
Thank you. And then the last question I want to wrap up with is, let's say someone is a software developer already, and they're thinking about switching into AI. This follows on to what you're saying, Spence, beforehand. Like, how do they do that? Should they be afraid? Like, no, take this boot camp, or what you just said, James, 80% of your job is the same, right? There are pieces of it that are, deployment and fixing it, et cetera. So any advice for a mid-career person or a person who's just thinking about switching into AI?
I mean, I can say, I think one of the profound changes is that, not you sort of before these deep learning frameworks were used in all the different branches where it's vision or speech, or I happen to work in translation. You had to write a lot of stuff by hand. And what's incredible now is that there are these frameworks that you can use where it becomes much more accessible than it used to be. When we first started our company, there's a learning procedure for our machine translation system that I spent, 6 months in grad school writing, and it was probably, 4,000 or 5,000 lines of code. It's pretty complicated. And that's like a single line of TensorFlow right now, which is really quite astonishing. And so I think if you want to get into just model building, then there's just such an enormous amount of information now about using these frameworks where it's not very hard to get started with that. I still think if basic research is what you want to do, then there just really isn't a substitute for grad school. Although it is certainly the case now that people are doing basic research in industry and just kind of learning it as they go. But I still think, yeah, if it's really model building and more applied applications, then certainly you can get a long way with the frameworks, be it PyTorch or TensorFlow, and the associated tutorials and recipes that go with them.
Maha, any last word?
Yeah, I think it's always good to start with a real application instead of just diving into the the mathematical algorithms and proofs and all of this, because you can easily get lost. So always start with a real application that excites that student or that person, and then learn through that experience and then expand from there.
Makes sense. All right. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you all very much for joining us for the Q&A. Thank you, audience, for joining us, and I hope we got to answer most of your questions, and I hope you have a good night. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye now.
Hello, everybody. We're excited to bring to you the next panel discussion, The COVID Era, What Are the Next Business Opportunities? My name is Jay I'm a senior advisor for Deutsche Telekom Capital Partners, and I'm really excited to be moderating this panel where we have an excellent selection of panelists from actually all over in different locations, working in different industries, that may be some great opportunities for growth in this COVID era. So really excited to introduce the panelists to you. Let's see, I'm gonna go by sequence here on the screen. So maybe we'll start with John. So John, if you could briefly introduce yourself and your company, and we'll go around the table from there.
Yeah, my name is John, and I'm the founder of Bear Robotics. I myself was an engineer at Google and opened my own restaurant. And I thought it was going to be a fun project for me, but it was not. It was a very dumb move. It was really shocking to me that how much physical labor was involved in operating a restaurant. I really wanted to change the way the restaurant is operated. So we started to build a robot and use it in my restaurant, and that become our business now. So we're making, manufacturing a self-driving robot that can carry dishes and drinks from kitchen and the bar to tables. That's gonna free up a lot of times for the servers so that servers can spend more time on a real hospitality.
Great, thank you, John, for the introduction. Next, I'll go with Samir. How are things over in Vegas? And please introduce yourself and your company.
Thank you. So I'm Samir Kamar. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm a physician by training. Finished my training at University of Pennsylvania and ended up launching several new models of healthcare throughout the country. And one of the things that we did at my practices was a lot of telemedicine. Except telemedicine, as it's mainly been defined for the past several years, has mainly involved video chat like this, where data collection was not as important as it is, say, in the real world, in the clinical world. I was also a consultant at Google, advising them on telemedicine matters, and I was a little bit disenfranchised when I realized that no one really had a solution to collect more data from patients during telemedicine visits. So I co-founded a company called MedWand, M-E-D-W-A-N-D. I am the CEO of MedWand, and we created a medical device that's right here, put it in the palm of your hand, and with this, patients can be examined anywhere in the world over the internet. So if each one of you on the panel today, for instance, all around the world had one of these, I could actually examine you. It has 10 of the most commonly used diagnostic devices in primary care, and I can use that to do a full examination on you right through your computer or your smartphone. We essentially created it to evaporate geographical barriers when it came to physical exams in medicine. And we believe that it's going to become the next frontier in medical practice. But that's what we do at MedWand.
Thank you, Samir. Yevgeny, I know you're located in Toronto, so please tell us how are things over there and about yourself and your company.
In terms of my background, I lead the AI group at the Bank of Montreal. So BMO is one of the, I think, the largest in North America, among the top 10. It's one of the top largest banks in Canada. So we have a lot of businesses that face consumers and small businesses. Many of those were impacted by the pandemic, and so we're seeing very close the implications of that, and also the opportunities to help customers in these situations. In my past, I'm actually a scientist by training, so I graduated from University of Toronto and did a few different things, worked in startups, worked in venture capital, in big tech and small tech, and ended up over the past few years building AI groups like this one, and excited to be here and talk to you guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Evgeny. Josh, I know you're in Korea right now, so how are things over there? And if you can introduce a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, hi. My name is Josh, and I live in San Jose, but I'm currently traveling in South Korea, and I very feel safe here. Yeah, I'm CEO and founder of Suite Technologies. We provide enterprises with a team collaboration platform. I used to be a heavy user of Slack for many years, integrating many tasks like Trello or Asana, Jira. But all we could do with those integrations is to receive text-based notifications into selected channels. And so that experience was so frustrating to go back and forth between chat, tasks, and get lost in various tabs scattered in various apps. So we built one convenient place that brings everything we need to get things done together in one convenient place. So we could turn our conversation into trackable tasks or share our tasks with full context and data to chat channels simply by drag and drops. Finally, to streamline different workflows, we're maintaining context. So this is what we do now.
Great. Thank you, Josh. So thank you, everybody, for their introductions. So I'm going to kick things off with, talking about kind of the new business environment that we are all dealing with. And, rather than talk too much about, how the business environment has changed, I think we're all living that. I don't think the audience needs to be reminded of that. It's kind of a drag. But I am interested in your perspectives of, there obviously we've been living with this, global pandemic for, at least the past 6 to 7 months, more so earlier in Asia. It's getting worse, especially in Europe and here in the US. And having said that, it sounds like there might be hope at the end of the tunnel with a vaccine. But I believe that there will be some fundamental changes in terms of the way that we do business going forward, even if we, so-called are able to get out of this COVID situation, virus, vaccine, etc. How do you think the fundamental business environment is changed, permanently going forward? I think that will be interesting because I think that will lead into a conversation around what the opportunities are specifically, and then what your companies are doing to take advantage of those opportunities. So I don't know who would like to go first and talk a little bit about that in terms of, the changed business environment overall. Josh, you're smiling. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, let me introduce a very interesting story. According to the Gartner Market Guide published today, trending topics related to collaborative work management, we call it task management generally, have changed with project management decreased and aligning goals and tasks increase on top. The most important thing to success in work from home is a collaboration, visibility, and work transparency rather than top-down management. This is the biggest difference we could monitor in this industry we belong to during the pandemic. So companies didn't have any option but to separate their teams physically in their distributed offices, but not the tools, which means more and more people are looking for a unified hub for collaboration. So this is the big difference in the industry.
I see. So you're saying that, in the COVID environment and most likely, post-COVID as well, the need for, direct management in the traditional way is getting less. And to your point, collaboration is becoming more important and alignment is becoming more important. I think that totally makes sense, especially in this environment where even if, offices open up again and people start coming in, there's still going to be a substantial portion of the workforce that is still going to be working remotely. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Anybody else have some thoughts about the kind of the fundamental changes in the business and working environment? Samir, go ahead, please.
My general views on business are that this pandemic has changed almost every industry. And social distancing and mask wearing and all of that is fine, but we have fundamentally changed at a level which in some cases will be irreversible in some industries. And I think the reason for that is people have learned to live over the past 8-9 months in a new way. And some of the things that people enjoy and find convenient and safer now probably won't see a return back to pre-pandemic times. The entire world just got a massive lesson on microbiology. And for anybody who didn't wash their hands as often, will probably wash them more now. Asia, I think, was always more advanced in terms of mask wearing than Europe or North America. And now we understand why, finally. In our industry, in telemedicine, we were actually quite lucky to be poised in a position where we could actually help immediately. Telemedicine is something that many people didn't understand pre-pandemic. It was sort of an experimental medical model where a patient is on the other side of the screen and the doctor or the nurse can take care of them remotely. Now, remote anything is the name of the game. And we were now in a unique position to be able to use our technology to actually examine patients anywhere else. MedWand, our product, is still due to get FDA approval in a few months, but we are already seeing its use in countries outside the US, which don't need regulatory approval because governments and medical institutions abroad were desperate to find a way to have their COVID patients examined from a distance. With a device like this, for instance, I can examine a patient in a hospital in Seoul, Korea, all the way here from Las Vegas, monitor their progress without even touching them directly and exposing the clinical workers to COVID risk. So I think that unfortunately the catastrophe of this pandemic is going to teach us some things that we're not going to go back on, and it will be quite interesting to see when the pandemic finally ends, what stays and what changes back.
Absolutely. Yevgeny, anything to add to that?
So my perspective is, from the financial industry and specifically the view on consumers from that perspective, right? And we see millions of people going through the variety of hardships that COVID brought with it, and it's both people who are employed or lost their employment, or people who have businesses and those businesses are either succeeding or failing, and so these are new kinds of hardships and new kinds of successes that we haven't seen before. But the opportunities are great, and at least in the very initial phase of it, many of the opportunities, I think, fortunately, were around helping people with their financial hardship. Just recently, we launched a feature into the BMO app, which uses deep learning to predict cash flow shortfalls. It's a very basic thing, right? And most people probably know when they're about to run out of cash, but you'd be surprised how many people don't. They don't realize that it's about to happen. And so just that simple feature helps thousands of people avoid going into overdraft and those various unpleasant situations. So I think from a bank perspective, I mean, it's certainly a different type of product, that different type of situations than any of the other panelists here. A lot of the more basic things are the ones we're going after, right? Like helping people avoid shortfalls. But the process of digital transformation, digital customer onboarding, digital interaction with customers has received a completely new strategic prioritization across all of our businesses, and and the funding that goes along with it. So there's lots of opportunities for sure.
Thank you, Yevgeny. Thank you for sharing that. And John, obviously you have had a chance to see the business environment change, I believe, in the Bay Area, I believe also in Japan, in Korea. What are you seeing as kind of some fundamental changes in the business and working environment that you've seen so far?
people go to the restaurant not just to eat food, but it's to socialize and enjoy the environment or the sports games, and that demand is still there. And now the customers want a safer dine-in experience, and that's where this robot helps a lot. You can take the orders through your app, or the servers can wear masks and have a distance, but like if your servers are touching your food, right? Or versus the robot delivers the food to you, I think most customers want to see the robot delivers the food to you. So I think those are changing, and now restaurant people have time to think about these changes, and that actually helps our business a little bit. And I think it's going to the right direction, and that's going to help the efficiency of the front of house operation.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. I would be in favor of those indoor dining experiences as well. So Samir, tell me a little bit about how your company is specifically dealing with this. It sounds like almost you were well prepared for this pandemic, and you have a product, and I don't know if you also include a service that is just ready-made for, you know, the post-pandemic era. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing.
Dine-in is always going to be there. Nobody is really enjoying the confines of the pandemic. Contrary to us, we are in the medical field where one-on-one interaction is expected. And what our company does is we make this medical device that has many very important tools. Diving a little deeper, so this palm-shaped, palm-sized device, it's about the size of an oversized computer mouse. It has with it, not to get too technical, but it has with it a digital stethoscope, so I can listen to someone's heart, lungs, and belly across the internet, no matter where they are in the world. It has an otoscope to look inside your ear canal. It has a non-contact thermometer, so I can get temperature. I can get also an illumination of the throat. I can look at the tonsils, the dentition, in a way where I can actually expand the 4K resolution on my side and control the lighting and the focus, even take pictures and live video if necessary for data storage. And then it has many basic vitals. I mentioned the thermometer, but it also has respiratory rate, oxygen levels, heart rate, and we can also do an EKG. If you put your fingers here, I can get an EKG. And the reason this has been so useful for entities right now that are using this during COVID is because we can actually assess patients from a distance to see if they're worsening or not. We can screen them for COVID symptoms as well. If your respiratory rate is high and your oxygen level is low and I'm hearing crackles in the lungs, that's a dangerous sign. And the pre-test probability of having COVID goes up, for instance. Or if there's a cruise ship which is docked offshore and it's been quarantined, then how do you examine those patients on a routine basis? Well, you just fly these in and you can do that. So we were positioned very nicely. But again, because telemedicine itself is a very new industry and has been rising slowly but surely over the past 10 years, mainly due to advances in internet speeds and 5G, 4G, smartphones, etc. The US, which holds the vast majority of the telemedicine market, predominantly due to frustrations with the healthcare environment in the US, I would think that's a big reflection of why telemedicine is so popular here, was slow to take hold until the pandemic happened. When the pandemic happened, everything changed. And we were in a B2B model originally, where we were selling our concept and ideas and software to hospital systems and medical institutions and nursing homes, people who already had invested infrastructure in telehealth. But then the consumers needed it. They needed something that they could get examined with. Grandpa Joe, who's at home with heart disease, does not want to take a chance and go to the local clinic for something small. So we then pivoted, like all good companies do during emergencies, and decided also to address the B2C market. And before you had to attach this to your computer, but now you can actually attach this to your smartphone. We did that specifically for that purpose. We also created a version which was priced less to be affordable for consumers. So we were in a good position already with the pandemic, but we weren't alone when it came to obstacles. I believe now that the world understands the importance of telemedicine, that the world understands that there are germs that exist even if they're invisible. We believe our whole industry is going to just skyrocket, and we're pretty excited about the next few years.
Yeah, no, I'd be very excited to avoid any doctor's visits as much as I can as well, especially in this environment. Thank you, Samir, for sharing that. I'm going to go to Yevgeny. So tell us a little bit more about Bank of Montreal's, COVID dealings and opportunities and activities, please.
Yeah, so I think that the big story here is really around adoption of digital, right? So, I mean, primarily the bank is a relationship business at various scales, right? So we have the retail bank, and then there's wealth management. There's a few branches of that, and there's capital markets. And so we're seeing a big shift across all of them towards digital interactions, digital activity by the customers. So the pace with which the bank adopts new technologies has accelerated. In the banking industry, I mean, everyone else here is running a startup, so to you guys it will not be impressive, right? But in the banking industry, generally things don't move that quickly. And so since March, we've rolled out from scratch several new AI-based capabilities that are facing our customers. That's unprecedented, because not only the budget was there, it's also the execution across a variety of teams across the enterprise, right? So there's hundreds of people involved in these initiatives. And so getting it done and live in 6 months is just unusual. The other area which I haven't mentioned previously is fraud. So banks normally deal a lot with fraudulent activity and money laundering, financial crimes in general. In the COVID era, it's a completely different world. So we're seeing a lot of, I mean, as you would expect, with the various government benefits programs for people experiencing hardship due to COVID, as you would expect with anything like that, there is a large amount of fraud. Both people claiming fraudulently to be eligible for these programs, and on the other side of it, people claiming that they provide services to our customers and pretending to be the Bank of Montreal. And so there's an acceleration there, both on the bad guys side and on our side to kind of prevent that.
Danny, are you seeing more of that fraudulent activity because of COVID? Because my feeling is that that's been there, regardless of COVID.
It's been there for sure, but it's new types of activities. For the government programs fund, because these programs are new and the regulations and the rules around them are new, people, so there are some actors taking advantage of that because it's not as polished. The analysts don't know quite how to differentiate the real cases from the fraudulent ones. At least didn't know when the whole thing started. Now they have built that expertise. We're using these techniques to drive a lot of the new products that we're building.
Thank you, Yevgeny, for sharing that. Now, last but not least, Josh, I know you've been really busy, a lot of great progress. So tell us more about what you've been up to at Swift.
We position ourselves as a last mover in a very saturated market in team collaboration to compete against single function products like Slack and Trello with better functionality or usability. However, during the pandemic situation, we call ourselves as a first mover and frontier to create new category design named Teams Collaboration for not only for vertical industry or vertical intra-office level collaboration, but also horizontal and organization to organization collaboration.
I see. That's really interesting. Kind of a new category you're carving out where it is beyond just a single team, but it could be multi-team collaboration. Very interesting. So great. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives around the overall business opportunities, as well as specifically what your companies are doing. I would love to ask each of you, each of the panelists, if you were not doing what you were doing in your particular segment, what do you think would be the most attractive opportunity in this COVID or post-COVID era? Who's willing to go first? Just quick answer, I'm curious. And I wouldn't mind if you guys like what Samir's doing or Josh is doing or John's doing, I'm just curious what you guys think would be interesting opportunities for yourself at a personal level. And it could be beyond, obviously, the opportunities that we've just discussed on the panel as well.
I was going to joke. I was going to say I would have probably gone to John to make his robots be more medical, and then go to Josh to put a software platform in place for that, and then go to Yevgeny for AI input and maybe a big funding raise. I think if it wasn't for medicine, I would probably be in cybersecurity right now. I see a lot of trends in every industry going towards computing, and anything remotely that's done, I think is going to have security risk. And so if it wasn't telemedicine and medical practice for me, it would most likely be cybersecurity.
Samir, that's a great answer. I was thinking the same thing. Anybody else? Any other interesting kind of COVID opportunities that you guys see?
I would open a restaurant.
Sorry, John, you said you would open a restaurant?
Yeah.
You haven't learned your lesson yet? I thought.
I think I can do better. Because I mean, a lot of the restaurants are suffering, and that means like some players who didn't do well before barely survived. Now they're gone. So it's doing like a reformation. So we can redefine the restaurant, redesign the layout, and adopt the new technology. I think we need some good restaurant brand for the future. I think that there will be a lot of opportunities there.
That's very interesting. And lastly, Josh, what are you seeing out there? If you weren't doing what you're doing, what would you be jumping on?
Yeah, as you know, we are not the only one to do this. Actually, I have great full respect for the frontier players, but actually we were born for this. So Suite was created as a work hub off the remote, by the remote, for the remote. So remote work essentials require having extremely different workflows from chat to tasks right next to each other to make them seamlessly integrated and highly interactive. We are taking full advantage as the last mover, so we could learn from the best and learn from the history.
So great. So now it's time to shift focus, and we're going to start our Q&A session. Thank you for everybody that have pre-registered and submitted their questions. There's quite a number of questions, so I'm going to go down the list and cherry pick the few that I think would be the most relevant for our panelists here. So the first one we have is, this is perhaps a little more broad and something that maybe everybody can actually answer. So this is a question from the audience asking, who is responsible for digital transformation / digital activity? The question is specifically, who's to blame when something goes wrong with the robot in the restaurant or telemedicine or in a bank? And I think this kind of covers everybody's interest, but it's a fair question, right? So I don't know who wants to go first. John, do you want to go first about what happens when robots misbehave?
I think there are several things, not just like robot misbehaving in the space. Overall, like, will a robot take over the job? Or, I mean, there's so many concerns around the robot. I mean, I gave a several talk around like humans' role versus robots' role in the hospitality space. The conclusion is that it won't happen like a technology company comes in and suddenly disrupt all the hospitality industry and they have no other choice, right? It's the choice that the hospitality industry makes based on the consumer's behavior. So we're not gonna like magically all the restaurants are changed by the robots and it's all automated restaurant all over the world. That only happens when the consumers love to see that happen. And then and it is clear that like there are millions of things to do. Robots can only do one or two things well, and fundamentally you cannot replace the human touch part in the restaurants. For example, if you ask the server, "Can I get a water?" then server going to look around and see all of the people and can get the context on how many water do you need, and then they just bring it out, right? Or things like that. There's so many things that cannot be really, interpreted well by the AI, or it's going to take so long time to make it happen. And the people love to interact with people, not the robot. So it's not going to be the same. And choice is ours, not the technology company. Then the second thing is that like when something goes wrong in the restaurant with a robot, that's more like when you have a car. Car can be a weapon, but can be a useful tool, and that's been how the technology has been evolved. And likewise, humans also make mistakes. I spilled the hot tofu soup, boiling hot tofu soup to a customer's pants. And I had to do, please don't sue me, sorry, I'll pay for that bill, and that happened not just once, a couple of times at my restaurant. But over 8 months of our robot users in the restaurant, we didn't have any major incident like that. So yeah, robots can make mistakes. Humans can also make mistakes. But if the robot can help reduce the human's mistake, that's where it's the advancement, right? Robot can empower the human, so that human can do more human role. And then the probability of robots making mistake over human, if it's better, then humans can live a better life. Like people are concerned about losing job, but like people actually don't want to work at a restaurant. That's a bigger problem. So you cannot find the people. So restaurants are having a hard time finding people, and they pay more, but people still don't want to work there because it's just too much hard work. So yeah, who's gonna be responsible at the end? It's like a joint work. Some part is a manufacturer's responsibility. Some part it's a liability from the restaurant by using some equipment, right? There are a lot of different equipments, and then if something misbehaves, then that becomes a liability and probably have to work through the insurance company. And then fundamentally in the long term is the choice from the restaurant customers.
Right. No, I think you're right, John. The fundamental liability and responsibility, just because a robot perhaps is replacing a human, I don't think fundamentally changes. Samir, any thoughts in terms of telemedicine? I'm assuming just because the communication channel is over the internet, that doesn't change any of the responsibility or the liability of the care provider, I would imagine. But what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. In our case, it's serious because if a mistake is made, then someone could die, literally. And so I like to break it up in 3 different parts. You have the physician and the physician's processes. On the other end, you have the patient who has the technology on his or her computer, whether it's diagnostics like ours and their computer. And then you have the connectivity in between. Those are 3 separate areas. And, if the physician makes a mistake, then that's the physician's fault. That is a malpractice issue. If you could have perfect connection, you could have the fantastic technology of the world on the patient side, but if the doctor is a horrible doctor and misdiagnoses the patient, then that is a mistake that is a malpractice that falls on the physician side. On the patient side, if you have technology that is malfunctioning, then that technology becomes liable. If the device did not measure the temperature accurately, if there was an inaccuracy with pulse oximetry, then that becomes the liability of the device company and the technology that's connected with that. In between, you have the internet. You have bandwidth issues. You have streaming issues. You could have a storm outside that affects the connectivity, and that is no one's fault. That just happens, and unfortunately, that becomes a problem. And then you try to create technology to circumvent that. But at the end of the day, it really, you have to see where the problem is in this chain, and that's where the fault lies. In medical practice, it's very dangerous to measure with inaccurate devices, and but that's why you have to use the best technology, and you get it done at a speed of the internet where the bandwidth is able to handle the technology and so forth. And of course, you need good clinicians on that side. But that's where I would put blame if I had to.
Right, makes sense. Evgeny, how about in a financial environment? Is the adoption of AI at the Bank of Montreal, has that changed any of the potential responsibility or liability?
I would say there's a few aspects to it. The responsibility in the financial space is very clear. It's the bank. No matter what goes wrong or how it goes wrong or why, it's just the bank, both in front of the government and in front of the customer. Now, one thing you can ask is what happens internally. So how do you ensure that systematically things don't go wrong at scale, or that there is clear accountability? And so there's quite a bit of effort around that, primarily around being able to explain the decisions, right? So imagine you make a decision about a customer, whether they get, they're qualified for a certain product or not, and that decision was made by an AI. It's easy if the decision is positive from a customer's perspective, but if the decision is negative, the customer will want to know why. And so you have to be able to explain why and stand behind that decision. And so I would say the responsibility lies with the company, but the responsibility for explaining the prediction still lies with the technology builders, with the groups that develop the AI, and then the chain of various compliance and privacy and ethics frameworks around it to make sure that nothing broken makes its way to the customer.
Got it. Thank you. In fact, that's actually a really good segue to my next, and maybe considering the time, maybe our last question perhaps, that actually addresses the issue of data privacy. As we all know, AI models require a lot of data. And there is a constant debate that is happening regarding the data privacy and kind of the ethics related to the data ownership as well. And so, considering that all of us around the table in different forms or manner are dealing with customer data in one way or another, some of it obviously is anonymized and randomized, but how do you gentlemen think about the issues of ethics around data privacy and data ownership? Maybe I'll start with Josh this time. You obviously, with the SWIT platform, deal with a lot of sensitive enterprise corporate data. How are you dealing with those concerns if you were to try to access and utilize that data as well?
We should give our customers every layer for data privacy. So there are very sensitive compliances we should commit and satisfy. And for the big, larger organizations, they deal with very sensitive data, especially for medical things, industries. So we have to get certified many different data layers like SOC2 or HIPAA, GDPR, or ISOs. So we have been operating penetration data security service and test, and we should be trying to provide the most secure security level for their data privacy to meet their compliances, and also give them the most guaranteed uptime. Like so many enterprises dependency has been sharply increased during the pandemic time. So we are happy to record the world best and secure uptime guaranteed 99.9999% for our customers for the last year.
Great. That's great. I mean, this is clearly an issue that covers a lot of the different sectors. Anybody else with some thoughts around data privacy and data ownership in general? I know that, Yevgeny, I'm sure you deal with a lot of sensitive customer data. You mentioned financial data, cash flow data, bankruptcy data. How are you dealing with that? Because I'm assuming that if to utilize some of the AI opportunities, that access to that data obviously is very, very relevant.
Yes, I think there's a very good principle that, and it's probably covered by many of the frameworks that Josh mentioned, which is splitting responsibilities, or making sure that no single person can do everything with the data, and there's multiple people accountable throughout the process. And so the way we operate is that the data that the AI teams use is fully anonymized. They actually never see any information about customers. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? When you're training models, what you care about is the kind of the global patterns that exist in the data, not necessarily a specific individual. And then when these frameworks are used, or when these models are used in practice, they're used by people who are normally authorized to access customer data anyway, and they do so by looking at the data, manually understanding it, and interacting with the customers directly. We just give them one more tool, right? And then on top of that, one of the areas we're working on is leveraging techniques like differential privacy. So I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that, but basically it's a way to provably remove any trace of individual data from trained models. It's a bit of an overkill at this point for in terms of regulatory requirements. But we're trying to be ahead of the regulations and give the customers the best privacy that's possible with today's techniques.
Right.
Yeah.
Samir, I mean, this is a big deal. Medical data information. What is the industry doing today, and how do you think that's going to evolve? With more AI-related applications and kind of the flood of data coming down the pipe.
Yeah. So data, as you said, Jay, is a big deal in medicine, whether it's in the US or everywhere else in the world. And at a clinical level, at an office level, that data is shared by the office staff. The physician knows on a one-on-one basis, if you were the patient, I would know exactly what your medical issues are. That goes into the electronic records. The staff sees it as well because they have to interact with you to make appointments and so forth. Zooming out to 30,000 feet, looking at thousands of patients and the data there, with all the data that we collect, whether it's demographic data, whether it's ICD-10 codes for medical diagnoses, for insurance purposes, or even the vitals that medical devices we can compartmentalize all of that. And that becomes anonymized as well. It's whitewashed. HIPAA, I am not convinced, is the most secure type of data protection. And at MedWand, at my company, we have gone through military encryption with several different layers and to make sure that it's at bank level security, because the medical data is just as important. In terms of data ownership, that is a very popular term right now. Who owns the data, even in medicine? And I think that's gone a little bit too far in the US. Patients want to own their data. Well, they actually do own their data. Your medical records are your medical records. You have the legal right in any of the 50 states in the US to go and ask for a copy of your records. It's no secret. And the medical practices are required by law to give that to you if you request it. They can't keep that from you. Everything that's written about you is also yours. I think where the dilemma comes in is when patients want to own the data and don't want to give that data back to anyone else. And that is where you have some issues. So as long as there's anonymity and effective whitewashing of that data, I think it's okay. But I believe you're going to need more layers of protection, especially as we advance ourselves in technology with medicine. And AI is definitely going to be important in medicine as well, but you need more cybersecurity. If I could invest in one field outside of telemedicine, it would be cybersecurity. That's the next frontier for, I think, all of us. And that's where, again, data protection comes in.
Right. And then kind of last word on this topic, John. How are you thinking about this? If I actually think about the number of sensors in a robot, I mean, there's actually more data than any other, kind of gathering device out there. And so there is going to be a lot of information, a lot of data. How are you specifically, considering kind of the robotics industry and specifically for your company, thinking about data privacy and data ownership?
Yeah, I guess in terms of technology, how to manage the data without hurting the privacy, I guess a lot of these big companies already have gone through with massive amount of global scale data like Google or Facebook. And I think I worked for Google before, and they're handling it very well. Like as the other panelists mentioned, like it's all anonymized and everything's recorded who has actually accessed some data. And if someone needs a raw data, it's all recorded, and then someone reviews it. So and I think those things have been developed, but now apart from the data, I mean, like we can use that. Like, I mean, we have what is it? The street view car passing by. You can anonymize these photos, right? So the technology is there that we can preserve it. It's more about the trust than whether this company actually, put an effort to preserve the privacy data properly, right? And when it comes to the robot or the self-driving car, and it's important to build up that trust with the customers. So I don't see there's any issues. We take these data very carefully. We don't keep any personal identifiable data in any storage. Some other companies did and had to be kicked out of the casino where the privacy is so important, right? So now that's kind of like how the companies build the trust with their customers, and it's going to take time. But the other part that I want to bring up is it's not the data part; it's on the algorithm part. Now there's ethical questions like. Now the self-driving car identify that the crash is unavoidable, but there's old people, a child, and a wall. If you hit the wall, it's going to kill the driver.
Right.
And then, so who's going to make the decision? It's either AI that is just trained, or a software engineer who put the heuristics in there. So if it's a software engineers put the heuristics in there, then it gives the engineer the power to decide those ethical decisions, right? If it's an AI, how do we control that? Like, there's really, it's not transparent. We don't have a good control on these deep learning model once it's trained. So that's kind of like the difficult part that we don't know well yet, and I think a lot of people are doing an active research on it. So that's going to be interesting. But like, I think we should worry more about these once we have more of these self-driving car robots out there. But it's a very good topic to watch out. So.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a very interesting point, and I know this conversation, we can go on for another few hours. But I, on behalf of the audience, I can tell you that I really enjoyed hearing about your insights from your different perspectives, focused on different sectors, and I'm sure the audience will agree that they'll join me for thanking each and every one of you for participating in our K Global event this year and making it very insightful. I really enjoyed and learned a lot. So thank you very much, everybody. Samir, Yevgeny, Josh, John, and I look forward to continuing the conversation, maybe privately, down the road. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.